I think we're up to part 4, Myth of Failure series. And I'm going to go over fixed versus growth mindset, which is a big thing from, Dr. Carol Dweck. She's got the book Mindset for people who want to go into it deeper. This will be an overview. Might not be the best explanation on the internet. You don't need the scientific understanding. I think just like the principles. And I don't know, I'll start with, I won't put you on the spot.
Go for it.
Do you feel like you have a good grasp yourself around this, or are you curious to learn more about it? Like what the difference is between the fixed and growth?
I have a decent understanding in my own head, but whether or not that maps to...
All right, let's walk through an example then.
All
so
right.
what's an area where you feel like you see, or okay, how about this? Do you have any areas you think you've seen yourself transition? It's fine if the answer's no.
Mm-hmm.
Transition from being a bit more fixed about something to a bit more, what she call, I don't even know if growth's a good word, but growth.
Yeah.
About it. Do you are there any, or are there any examples where you, maybe one area where you are a bit more, you feel like I've been a bit more fixed, and another area where you've been a bit more
I think
growth?
Fixed. I think before we started podcasting, before you were encouraging us to start with the Chiefs.
You and Dom,
Yeah, Dom and I to start with the Chiefs.
Plug for With the Chiefs.
Plug
podcast.
for With the Chiefs. Very good.
The best running podcast around.
It's fantastic. It's not as big as the other Chiefs out there, but it's not about. I'm not attached to the numbers. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, podcasting when we started and you were floating the idea saying, you guys would probably have a good podcast. We're like, no, we wouldn't.
Well,
Okay,
Good example.
That's an Astro example. And I think it ties into the fixed mindset being like, we can do things, but podcasting's probably not one of them, because why? Well, why? Oh, because I'm scared of it. What? So it's more around because historically I've been a little bit shy in those sort of situations, which I think stems from the public speaking or the getting nervous and stuff like that. But that's changed to a growth mindset where it's more like, oh no, if you just do it, keep doing it, if you enjoy it, then that translates to other things, right? So you asked about fixed mindset. I would definitely say when I started, it's almost like when you start things. And when
Very common.
It's like network, like doing a little bit on network engineering. Yeah. Basic. I'm not technical. Yeah. I couldn't understand that. Yeah. When reality, you just need to sit with it. Yeah. And you will learn if you keep.
That's a good sentence you just said.
Yeah.
Sit with it and you will learn if you keep.
You just got to
cut you off, which is terrible.
Yeah. If you
keep going.
Yeah, but I think the way I view this is my mind goes from fixed to growth when I start seeing that, oh, hang on. It's very hard when you're unfamiliar with something to have a growth mindset at first, is what I found. Yeah. Because you don't know.
For some people, it's not. So let me try and clarify what this is for people who are not familiar. I'm doing my best here. Fixed mindset is kind of like the idea that your abilities in any domain, and it'll be different. Like the way I think about podcasting might be different to the way I think about sales, like Joe the salesman versus Joe the podcaster. But that your ability is fixed in place. That's kind of static. It doesn't really change much. There's only a little bit of wiggle room over time, so you probably can't actually get better. And you often become much more attached to that, whether you think you're bad at something or whether you think you're good at something. So when a challenge is a challenge to someone who's in a fixed mindset about something is very disturbing. It's really rattling. It really gives you a lot of anxiety, a lot of panic. I can't figure it out. Or I can't do it. Or it shouldn't be this hard. I'm good at this. It shouldn't be this hard. And you start catastrophizing.
I found that at uni when I had...
I was going to use that example
when I had technical subjects, that like programming, I couldn't get my head around. I was like, I'm just not technical. It's a good way to shut off. Yeah. And it's not the end of the world. Sometimes you think... I want a disclaimer around myth of failures. I don't really love the attitude around, I've got to do something that's scary. I think that's too simple. It's very general.
A lot of people use fear as a good signal. Like actors use it a lot. Like the role scared me. That's how I knew it's probably good to take. But it's not because it's scary alone. That's pretty stupid. Like I don't go do a skydiving. It scares me, right? But I'm also like, my mate tried to get me to do it. Robbie, a good friend of ours.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, hang on, well, I don't care about
it.
The prospect of doing it doesn't excite me.
Yep.
And so am I limiting my life by not skydiving? I don't know. Like,
it's like podcast scares me, but I want to do it, and it would be
I can
create
see
all
there's
these
utility
things.
there I value on the other side of the wall of fear.
Yep.
When there's no value on the other side of the wall of fear, you don't see it. Like, why overcome the fear? That's what fear's for. Fear can be quite useful. Like, I'm afraid I'll waste time doing something. Anyway, so back to fix versus growth. Growth is kind of like challenges almost excite you in the fullest extent of a growth mindset. Right? Your abilities are not static, they're fluid. They can constantly change. You can get better at things, right? You can start off bad, but deal with it, right? And just persist because of we talked about the 1,000 doors thing, and you know, like who starts amazing at like an instrument, right? Some people have a bit of a predisposition for it, but that's fair enough. They just seem to pick it up. It seems very suited to them. But no one starts out flawless.
No.
Right? But you can get really good if you persist. What won't help you is if you have the mindset that like, it's too hard and I don't, I can't do it. I can't do it. So that's like more of the growth mindset. So using like very specific examples, this is the irony of counterintuitive, like education, the academic focus in education. Personal story. When I was at high school, if you remember, I got high grades pretty consistently. Right?
Very, very high grades.
Which is not a humble brag, because listen to the story. Now, ironically, I was in much more of what we'd call a fixed mindset, what Carol Dweck would call a fixed mindset that whole time.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
All right? I was very attached to the idea of myself being the intelligent person. All right? And that's some Astro stuff there. I was looking around at the hierarchy and like, I'm the top end. I'm one of the smart people in this grade.
Yeah.
I would get a kick out of people asking me for help, which is not necessarily bad, but it feeds the ego too. It's both.
Yep.
And that idea of myself was something I became attached to, right? And so if there was a subject that I just wasn't good at, I was like, well, just don't do that. That's one of the ones I'm not good at. I'll do the ones I am good at so I can win. And I wanted to get the prizes. I wanted to come first in as many things as possible. Why? Glory. Why not?
Yeah.
Oh, Western culture and winning. It's like, what's wrong with winning? Win. Now, and if I didn't do well on a test, so I was so anxious to get test results back because everything was like a pass and fail on like me as a person. Because I was so attached to being the smart guy. And if I bombed on plenty of tests at school, and then everyone would be like, oh, I beat Joey in a test.
That's how you know you made it in the school environment.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh my God.
But that used to like kill me. And I used to be really anxious about beating the competitors in English versus math it just meant so much. It was this Astro thing of like, it was almost like life or death.
Why is that fixed mindset?
Because it's very fixated and static and identifying with it heavily. So fixed does not mean you're bad at something. That's the point I want to make. Now listen, our good friend Scott, and you might have been like this too, if I remember back, wasn't good at everything. Right? He was a bit misbehaved a lot in classes and stuff like that earlier on in high school. He kind of got his act together later on. And he went from like being middle of the grade in English to like getting a really good mark in the HSC, right?
Scott and I were in the same classes and we rode that.
Yeah, you probably would have. I think you would have been quite similar.
Yep.
So why is that different? I was like from kindergarten, I was always in like the top 5. Never low in my every year of high school.
Wow.
Academically. So it's fucking not everything, but I was always in the top. Academic. Never once out of it.
Wow.
Never. For 13 years straight. So I was only ever there. It creates this huge vulnerability psychologically if you identify with it. Because I haven't seen myself go from being bad at something to good. Whatever bad and good means.
So when
Scott as an example did. So that gives you the attitude that, I can start not good at something He's not looking at himself like I'm the English guy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm looking at myself like I'm the English guy and I want to be the maths guy. He's not looking at himself that way. He's thinking, oh, wow, okay, I figured this out. I wonder what else I could figure out.
That was the first, I kind of was in classes with Scott, and that was the first indication that I'm not, the notion of being smart, I would say I had an incredibly fixed mindset initially, and then I started doing better, significantly better, when I started applying myself to be like, that's when that belief started kicking in as to, hang on a minute, you're not an idiot.
Exactly. So when I went to uni, it's a completely different kind of like system of assessing, testing, everything. And so there was this massive, I was up here for those listening to audio, putting my hand high, and then my marks were like way lower at uni, but they were still probably high. There's still like distinctions and shit. But I was the high achiever, you know. And I talked to a lot of people who are like strong achieving academically at high school, and they say a similar thing, that it felt very painful to then try to adjust to different kind of systems. Like the workplace skills are not the same as what gets you good marks at school.
No. Yeah.
All these 18-year-olds listening are thinking, oh, no, I'll be right. And,
you know, you just wait,
you just wait, kids. Yeah. And then you're used to being a high achiever, and then you meet this, all this information all of a sudden tells you you're not. Right? And now that delta is painful. And you get defensive. You start blaming others, right? It's because uni is stupid. It's because the tests are wrong. It's because of that. And I still don't see the way I think they are is a strange bubble, but I think both things are true. I think it was a very strange system, and things they assess are very peculiar in school and university. I think most people tend to agree these days anyway, even the universities. So, but also I was just defensive. It wasn't like get a bad mark, bit disappointed, but then, okay, like what do I need to do to improve? It was like, why can't I get this right? And defensive and anxious. And what that does is it makes you much less of what we'd call a risk taker, what we'd normally call a risk taker, where, you know, you're looking to confirm, in my example, you're looking for situations that confirm you're a high achiever. That's how you're filtering. Because you've got this identity you're fixated on and you're trying to maintain it. People don't understand that the people who are very psychologically at risk are the ones we call high achievers in a capitalist society. I hear a lot of terrible stories about people who ducks their years. What happens to them after high school? That could be a documentary. The most terrible things. Because you think about how driven you have to be to get there, and you get so attached and so intense about it. It's this flawed pursuit based in just like satisfying your own ego. And it's arbitrary. And
a little bit.
And you give this image of yourself that you're the king, and it doesn't translate to reality, the reality of the rest of the world. So this is really important for Myth of Failure, because it's just literally all about the way you deal with things. One of the best things that happened to me was, I have this idea of like my relationship with failure as like a big category thing over time, and doing like from the ground up and the real estate business, and just being like forced to really brutally kind of, again, fail. But what is failure? But like fail in terms of not do the things everyone expects to be the successful outcomes. Like make lots of money and conquer the world. That constantly happening slowly shifted me to being less attached to my own image over time, massively. It was just basically, it's like, it's in one sentence, in one word, it's humbling. It's humbling you, and it's forcing you to, so instead of that default reaction being blaming others, in the book, in Dweck's book, she uses the John McEnroe example. It's a pretty famous tennis player who's always like blaming the umpire, It's an example of fixed mindset. Whereas the growth mindset tennis player like loses a point and is like, all right, I lost a point. Like, what did I learn from that? All right, I need to get back in. It's just this much more composed, healthy way of being. It's why one of the outcomes of that book is, encouraging people not to praise results, but to praise effort. Because you don't control results. But if you praise people for their results, they start to identify with them. They're like, oh, okay, now I want to win the test
Yeah.
so that I'm the smart kid. But reward effort. It's rewarding input, not output. Because have almost complete control of what you put into something, like how hard you work, what you apply yourself to, all that. And whether you show up or not prepared. Input, right? Output, like where you finish in the race, you have less control over that because you don't control the other runners.
Yeah.
You control you. You control your running, training, your prep. If you did everything you can, what else can you do?
Yeah.
But you can learn from that situation and improve at the next race. So that would be a growth mindset. Whereas the fixed is like, this race is like bullshit, and you'd come up with an excuse. I don't know what you'd come up with a running race, but conditions or something, or shoes or footwear. Or
I was going to say the running example is a good example, especially with there's a lot of comparisons in once you get fitter, and you start realizing you run a good time, for example, then you're attached to that time. Yeah. So any deviation from a certain level of fitness creates this sense of anxiety if you're attached to that time. For example, when you're doing training and your splits are off and you're like, oh shit, I'm not, you can, this happened to me.
Because splits are like small markers of like your progress towards the final time.
Like I ran in Gold Coast, I ran like a really good half marathon, right? Yeah. And exceeded what I thought I could run in that sort of period of time. Yeah. And then it created a sense of like, oh, well, you don't want to get too far. You don't want to deviate from that level of fitness, right? So, for example, I got COVID. Yeah. And then like things happen and you start worrying about and you forget like, okay, I do this running thing because I enjoy it. Yeah. So you have to reconvince yourself and...
Very good example.
And like revalidate the growth mindset in a sense. Well, I don't know how it relates. For example, you just got to reground yourself in the fact that the times are arbitrary.
Yeah. This paradigm, which is psychological, it's a psychological paradigm, right? So it comes from the field of psychology. And they don't tend to bring in terms like attachment into it and stuff like that. That concept of attachment's more like the kind of the DeMellos and the Alan Wattses and the, like not psychologists necessarily, but kind of like the more like philosophical kind of spiritual kind of concept. And but I see it working in so well because it really is a pathway. It's all about attachment versus non-attachment, letting things be. Because the reason why it's so important is because that mindset is everything to actually doing something. Yep. So if I expected this podcast to be Joe Rogan level within a year or two, and that was the only way it was going to be worthwhile doing, that's the biggest obstacle for it actually becoming something of that level. Right? Yeah, funny. Because you have to go on the journey, and one of the next episodes we'll do is about like everything you do is actually practicing what you're actually going to do is the degree, not learning about it in theory and then doing it. The first chapter, right? The first month, the first 5 episodes, the first week on the job, the first race, the first 10 races, the first 4 weeks in the gym. They're the first degree for the actual thing you're doing. It's just the front bit. And that's the same with figuring something out. You can't learn baseball by theory. You can't learn piano by theory, right? You can't learn podcasting by theory. You can't learn writing by theory. You can't even learn business by theory. You can't even learn medicine by theory. You can't learn law by theory. You can't learn psychology by theory. You can't learn philosophy by theory. You can't learn shit all by theory.
What about economics?
That term's offensive.
Our next friend we're going to talk about has...
My brother who studies economics thinks concept of economics is hilarious, and take that.
So does Taleb.
So, figuring things out is growth mindset, and it's the best example is the kind of our friend Scott, and you would be a good example in the academic domain, which I think is a dumb domain. It's just a good tangible example. Because everyone's kind of been through school. I think school's stupid for this reason. One of the biggest reasons school's stupid is for this reason. Yep. It creates a huge fixed mindset in people that they're stupid or that they're smart. Both stories about telling yourself a story about your intelligence is, I think, inevitably counterintuitive. You should not be attached to any form of your own intelligence. It's good to have belief in yourself and the belief that you can figure things out, which is definition, I think, of the growth mindset, right? Like if I'm going to go do Good example. I'm doing a fiction book now, right?
Mm.
What qualifies me to do a fiction book?
I would say a lot, but...
Oh, you'd say a lot, but if you're looking for a black and white thing, there's nothing. Someone asked me on a chairlift on my ski trip again, like, oh, you know, you're doing books, like, did you study something around that? I go, no, I studied something completely different.
Did you study how to do fiction writing?
But you know what? I'm doing it. And because it started as a non-fiction book, I've done one other kind of non-fiction book, The 18 and Lost, which is biographical, really.
Buy it now.
Yeah, buy it now, please. We're not attached to sales. We're not doing this for money. But if you buy my book...
We'll be very happy.
I won't be upset.
And I'll be negotiating a 3% affiliate link.
And I'm not attached to it. I'm not attached
either. I'm not attached to it. Can I have my affiliate link, please?
But we were doing this non-fiction, working with this lovely guy, Paul, on it. And then I said, you know, we said together, like, the best way to do this is make something that's actually funny, that people can laugh at and it's entertaining, which would be a fiction book. All right, and making up the story of these characters and how they behave like fuckwits in the workplace. And I wasn't going to wait till like get approval to be a fiction writer. Now, the objection a lot of people would have in that situation is, oh, but what if it's no good? My thinking is, so what if it's not? How do you define something as being no good? If most people don't like it, is that enough to say it's no good? Majority opinion? How much stock do we place in majority opinion? All right? Majority opinion elected Trump. Right? If you ask like everyone what their favorite song is, and you had to settle like what song most people are happy to listen to, it'd probably be like a very basic, like not one of the best songs ever. You know, like the average of opinions balances out as average. Right? It balances out in the middle.
That's a good
so
point.
if I'm the only person who enjoys the book, it probably won't make money, right? It might not catapult me to the top of the writing canon as one of the most celebrated writers of our time, but it might help me learn so much for the next one.
Yep.
And it will.
Yep.
No matter what the commercial outcomes are, this book is going to help me so... It already has. And so when you're in that place, you can be non-attached to outcome. Right? Because you know that I'm just going to keep learning and figuring this out. And the best way is by bloody practice.
No, I've read a few books on how to be a good podcast. I'm kidding.
You're wrong, Joe, because please download the manual how to do a great podcast.
For example, we had a podcast which Dom and I felt was a bit awkward and stuff like that. Yeah. But we learned from that because we approached it in a certain way, very structured and rigid. Yeah. And when we tried to do that, it was like felt a bit robotic. And we need to do that to learn that, you need to ease up a bit. Like it's there's no book that's going to say or lecture that's going to say, all right, it's important because everything is so, I'm sure we'll touch on this,
specific,
complex, nuanced.
You're right. Yeah.
And stuff like that.
So let's finish up this episode with like, how do you action? How do you action this? And personally, I don't know what you think. Personally, it's like if you enjoy what you're doing, you know, I have that concept. I haven't made an episode about it. Maybe it's on the blog, The Audience of None. Like, what would you do for no praise, no money, whatever? It doesn't mean that you can't get money or praise from doing it, but like you don't need it. And if you can do things for like Audience of None, you will naturally find yourself in that growth mindset, rather than telling yourself, big growth mindset, big growth mindset, big growth. You can figure this out. You can figure this out. They said on the podcast. That's like that's the dumb way. That's the prescriptive, like tactical way. It doesn't work because the foundation hasn't been changed.
That's the fixed growth mindset.
Yeah, it is. Well done. This is why you get the big bucks, but not from this. It's a great example. So it's the foundation. And the foundation to me is like, what's fucking worth doing if nothing actually happened from it? Nothing. That the doing of it was the joy. Because everything else can come anyway. And if you want an example, Joe Rogan and his podcast.
Fantastic
Clip Luke sent me this morning of the episode he did with Mark Zuckerberg, 1,839 or something, whatever it is. People towards the end, there's a 2-minute clip where he's like, "I've done nothing deliberate to grow this." But that would ensure the ultimate growth mindset. Right? And growth is not, I hate the word growth. It's kind of like this, it's infused with all these false kind of capitalist kind of values that like growing something is big and that you grow yourself as a person. I don't think it seems like things always need to get bigger and you need to add to yourself. So I kind of really dislike the word. I think just improve. The attitude that you can just improve at things. That I'm doing it, I'm satisfied with it as it is now, but it will also improve. Not like this is not good enough, but I'm not good enough, but I need to improve. Like, and Alan Watts criticizes this heavily, like that over attached to self-improvement. But that I'm doing this book, I'm doing it to a quality I think is acceptable, really good. It may or not be the case, but I'll continue to develop and hone this craft, and I just love doing it. I'd be happy to do it if it doesn't. As long as I have enough food and water and shelter, I'd be happy to do it for no money. For no one even reading it. I prefer people to read it. But even if it was 10 friends and we had a good laugh around the funny book I did, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But it could still be more. So that is my approach to it. And focus on the input, not output, is big too. So you don't control the output. Right? I have business failures galore. I have burnt hundreds of thousands of dollars doing this and that. But it's also like, what are you going to do? Go back and kick yourself and ban yourself from ever trying something again? I'm in a better place now, having done that, than I was before to do more of it. Because I've learnt. Focus on input. I don't control the output. 1,000 doors. Use the experience of previous rooms to inform the next doors you open and how you do it. You're always improving. So that's my take. I don't know if you have any thoughts about actioning that.
I always have thoughts, but on these things, but nothing.
Do you have anything you'd like to add on that?
No, not really.
All right. Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger button.
Nothing more to add, Joe.
All right, beautiful. Well, we'll keep going with the Myth of Failure series.